Poetry is a word that is famously difficult to define. So, for example, if you ask me what is a novel, well, kind of the definition is it's a story that is at least 60,000 words long. What is a short story? Well, the definition there is a little bit loosier goosier, 1,000 to 20,000 ish words. After that, you become a novella until you get to 60,000 words. But poetry is more difficult yet to define. However, if you were going to say that poetry has an essence, a spirit, or something that is even loosier goosier than the definition you are trying to put on poetry itself, I think that you would do as good a job as any by just saying poetry is defamiliarization. What is defamiliarization? Well, we'll get there in a moment, but if you were to sort of take defamiliarization, which is more of a literary theory term, and flip it to the writer's perspective, you would be talking about Ezra Pound's advice to, quote, make it new, end quote. Make it new. So, the poem that we have, welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in two playlists here on the channel. Number one being the poetry discussion playlist, and number two being the Emily Dickinson playlist. And the poem in question today is I Felt My Life with Both My Hands, and it reads as such. I felt my life with both my hands to see if it was there. I held my spirit to the glass to prove it possibler. I turned my being round and paused at every pound to ask the owner's name for doubt that I should know the sound. I judged my features, jarred my hair, I pushed my dimples by and waited. If they twinkled back, conviction might of me. I told myself, take courage, friend. That was a former time. But we might learn to like the heaven as well as our old home. This feels like poetry, doesn't it? This feels very poetic. This feels like you're in a poem at the onset. For example, you open up a book and all of a sudden there are laser swords and there are pew-pews that are laser guns. You're going to feel like you're in sci-fi or fantasy. You're not going to feel like you're in a history book. You're not going to feel like you're in a biography. You open up a book and all of a sudden there are all of these thous, hath, thine. What you're going to know a time period. This opening stanza. I felt my life with both my hands to see if it was there. I held my spirit to the glass to prove it possibler. That feels like poetry, but why? I assert that it is defamiliarization. I felt my life. How do you feel your life? Why would you need to use both hands if you were doing so? And if you were doing it, isn't it automatic that it is there? I held my spirit to the glass. The looking glass? What glass are we talking about, Emily? To prove it possibler. To prove the spirit possibler? To prove the life possibler? What is it that we're talking about? Well, what is defamiliarization? What is a further extensive sort of discussion of it? Well, I'm getting this from literariness.org. The Russian formalist concept of defamiliarization proposed by Viktor Shklovsky in his Art as Technique refers to the literary device whereby language is used in such a way that ordinary and familiar objects are made to look different. It is a process of transformation where language asserts its power to affect our perception. It is that aspect which differentiates between ordinary usage and poetic usage of language and imparts a uniqueness to a literary work. While Roman Jacobson described the object of study in literary science as the literariness of a work, Jan Mukarovsky emphasized that literariness consists of foregrounding of the linguistic medium, and Viktor Shklovsky described it is to estrange or defamiliarize by medium. I would contest that the first one here, Roman Jacobson, described the object of study in literary science as the literariness of a work. I would say that might be short stories. Literariness. When you were looking at all of the elements of literature in a thing, Mukarovsky emphasized that literariness consists of foregrounding the linguistic medium. I would suggest that maybe that is novels. How else are you going to get through 60,000 plus words of a thing if it's not linguistic enough? The linguistic part of things has to flow well enough, or the whole thing, you've been in the middle of a novel that was not linguistic enough, and you just wanted to put the thing down. Viktor Shklovsky described it as to estrange or defamiliarize by medium. I suggest that that is poetry. The primary aim of literature in thus foregrounding its linguistic disruption, the modes of ordinary linguistic discourse, literature strange. What did I do there? Where's the... I lost something. There's no intro. Okay. The world of everyday perception and renews the reader's lost capacity for fresh sensation. A similar technique deployed in drama was alienation effect, introduced by Bertolt Brecht in his epic theater to disrupt passive complacency of the audience and force them into a critical analysis of the art as well as the world. Although the concept of defamiliarization was earlier advocated by the Romantic critic Coleridge in his Biographia Literaria, 1817, this idea goes all the way back to, it was conceived in terms of subject matter and in novelty of expression. It was conceived... Okay. The formalists, however, endorsed defamiliarization affected by novelty in the usage of formal linguistic devices in poetry, such as rhyme, meter, metaphor, image, and symbol. Thus, literary language is ordinary language deformed and made strange. Literature, by forcing us into a dramatic awareness of language, refreshes our habitual perceptions and renders objects more perceptible. I don't know if you know this, but one of the facts about our olfactory system, the way we smell things, is that your nose doesn't pick up scents as much as it picks up change of scent. So, if you've ever spent a couple days away from home and you come back and you think, do I really smell like that? That is because you didn't smell that, whatever that is, because you lived there. That was your place. You spent so much time there, you couldn't smell it. If you haven't been in that position, certainly you've known someone who was in that position. This argument for defamiliarization is kind of leaving your home for a couple days. In Emily Dickinson's poem here, the home is the soul, is the self. Leave yourself for a little while and then come back and see if you can stand the smell. That is defamiliarization. Seeing if really, the meanest trick of defamiliarization, when it can be done, is that it shows you something in a light that you no longer like it. You defamiliarize something to the point where the audience does not recognize it, and when they do recognize it, they don't like it anymore, right? So the interesting thing about this poem in particular up here is that we never really get back to recognition of the self. I felt my life with both my hands to see if it was there. I held my spirit to the glass to prove it possibler. I turned my being round and paused at every pound to ask the owner's name, for doubt that I should know the sound. I judged my features, jarred my hair, I pushed my dimples by and waited, if they twinkled back, conviction might of me. I told myself, take courage, friend, that was a former time, but we might learn to like the heaven as well as our old home. Throughout the length of this poem, our speaker never gets back to liking the self. So that is what I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.